officers on the case by now. It might have been a difference. These days, been looking at it too long with nothing. You know, it's just stuck in their ways.
Well, that's part of why I want you to look. You make sense to me. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing. I don't know shit about this. That's why I'm kind of uncomfortable about it. I don't even know what the hell I'm doing here, because frankly, I shouldn't be. But I'm just trying to clear you on my stuff as well. This is a way to do it. Normally, we have all the discovery, so we can make value decisions as we go. What we're going to do now, hey Dave.
You still
No, come on in. I'm just explaining to Jaffar that, you know, one of the things that I would appreciate for Jaffar to do is certainly to talk to you straight up about some of his concerns, why he thinks things are the way they are. And I've explained to him, and I talked to Chris, and I said, look, today is a day they're going to ask you some hard questions. And frankly, that's what we're here for. And I've also explained how I'm kind of uncomfortable because I don't know why I'm doing this, number one. This is not my case per se. But the idea is normally we have discovery, we're on some equal footing.
Right.
And right now, I'm sort of sitting here and we're responding without really knowing what the discovery is. So that being said, I wanted Jaffar to be in a position where he could be asked the questions that truly are the tough questions. So in other words, challenging, as opposed to Jaffar's statement, hey, let's go Crystal, how can anybody believe Crystal? Everybody knows she's a dope fiend, everybody knows she says what she says.
Well, I guess those same things could be said about you.
Sure.
Okay, why should we believe you, Jaffar? You sling dope.
Slinging and using, though, two different things.
Yeah. Well, and here's my spin on that. I suppose if it was one isolated dope fiend witness making those claims, I would be a lot more suspicious of those claims than when you have a number of people from a number of different backgrounds all saying the same thing. And I'm going to be very candid with you, Jaffar. I think one of your concerns is this illusion that you may be operating under, and maybe I haven't communicated that well to you. Maybe through the process you think that maybe there's an alternative to that. But from my perspective, the state has made a tremendous offer to you, to your benefit. But is there a cost? Well, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely there is. And that cost is that you provide a truthful, honest statement, and that potentially, should the state require you to testify, you'd be willing to testify. And if you're not willing to do that, I'm not sure we have much to talk about.
Making an offer if I was involved. If I'm not involved, what type of offer is it?
Well, to be truthful about what you do know. Now, your offer benefits you on a variety of different fronts, not only with regard to this specific, the potential for your prosecution in this case, but also on your other pending cases. And I guess my first question to you is that something you're interested in doing, Jaffar? Because if it's not, if you want to roll the dice and take your shot at your trafficking counts,
I thought I wouldn't have been here doing that interview last time for those cases.
No,
that's what I thought. Okay, so
straight up, he wants to do what he can do.
Okay.
He just wants to make sure you guys aren't laboring under a misassumption and then saying to him, well, this is the way it is, and he's trying to say, wait a minute, you guys got this wrong, this should be thought of in this sense. That's what
I guess one of the things that even, and your information about Tynesha, we'll use that as an example. Even she says what all the other witnesses have said about communications between you and Max Reed that night.
That's crazy.
And you know what? How could she possibly know?
That's what I want to know. Why can't you just check the phone records? Because I know I didn't talk to Max from any number that night. I mean, you got the phone number. I didn't talk to them, no matter what they say.
Well, you understand our situation too, is we are getting several different versions from people. People that are with you that night who say Max Reed called you, and you tell them Max calls you. Now we have Tynesha who says, I'm with Max, and Max calls G and tells him. So, and what Dave said earlier was exactly right. It's not one isolated person, because you're right, we weigh that. I think Mr. Houston will represent that. We weigh what our witnesses say, but when we have countless, in excess of 5, somewhere between 5 and 10 witnesses who all have a very similar story, that you rode by the crime scene with them in the car, that you received a phone call from Max Reed, it's not that we're here to say, hey, Jaffar, we want you to tell us what we want to hear. That's not what this is about. What we're saying is for us to believe what you're telling us, we would have to completely disregard what 8 people have told us from different aspects of life, including some people who, quite frankly, are very close to you. Some people who took extreme measures to protect you, who have told us information. And so it's up to you, and I think Mr. Houston said it best last time we met. If there's a cost, you don't get something for nothing, and the cost is this. And it's up to you. You want to take it? Great. You don't? Fine. We'll proceed however we feel is best. But we know certain things, and you've told us the opposite of those certain things up until this point. If you want to come and tell us the whole story, we're here to listen. If you don't, no hard feelings. We'll go our separate ways. We'll do what we got to do.
Chris said you were going to go over with him exactly what you had in the fact he's got the letter. Let's start with that. And Jaffar, I don't want you to respond to it in the sense of they're a liar. Listen to what they're talking about, because I think part of this is, we're in the dark, you guys have the information, Jaffar doesn't know what you're talking about specifically. Lay it out for him, let him understand where you're coming from and why you think
Well,
about
let's start with Trish Martinez and Crystal Murray, okay? They're interviewed separately. They're never made privy on what the other person has said, to what the other person has said. But they describe the same events happening immediately before regarding your phone call with Max, and they claim to have accompanied you to a meeting with Max, at which point you drove by the crime scene, according to what they say. Now now, those two people, separate and independent of each other, it's not like we interview them together and one adopts the other. They are interviewed separately, and they both say essentially the same thing.
Crystal goes into really far greater detail to that, about coming into some more crystal that you guys had the night before, that you tell her that night of the murder that you guys are going to come into some more of the crystal, similar to the crystal that you guys had the night before and claims you had bought from Mo the night before.
And you even acknowledged that the night before you had done some business with Mo.
And as you drive by the scene, that you tell her, hey, these fools up here, I brought these guys to do something, and they acted a fool, and they killed the guy here. And that Max is in the back seat of the car, tucking down with his jacket pulled up over his face, trying to hide in the back seat of the car. Well, but you take that with what Tanisha tells us recently, which is that, yeah, when they come running back to the car, that as we're driving away, Kali says what he says, and that Max gets on the phone, and I hear Max call G and saying, you got to meet me right now. And she says, I don't hear what G says, but he must have said, I'm busy right now. And because he says, no, you don't understand, this thing just went really bad, you got to meet me right now. Which is exactly what Crystal Murray says. You get the phone call, and you tell Crystal, I got to go right now. And she goes, well, I'm coming with you. And that you tell her what's taking place. Those two people are completely independent sources, and their stories from opposite spectrums, opposite sides of the rainbow, match up identical.
Whenever when that Crystal around like that drugs, why would I have her around doing a meeting like that? And then tell him I'm busy, and I'm involved in some of these, but even if it wasn't a murder, if it was a robbery, I'm involved and I'm busy. If the story's gonna sound right, no matter what.
Well, fairness, I just told you, right? Tanisha says, I don't know what he says, but I'm under the impression that Jaffar must say he's busy because Max tells her.
He's calling.
She says that she knows that Max is calling you.
She knows that. That's wow.
This is the point, though, G. That's just two
So she
people.
called me, and
And she says, no, I did not call him. No way, no how. Didn't happen.
We have people that say you come by and pick Kali up later, that night of the incident as well, that Kali calls you and says, you got to get me back to Oakland.
We didn't leave that night.
And you, in your statement, and I think there is some room for reasonable people to disagree, because you say that you drop him off days late, but nonetheless you take him to the area at the Greyhound. down the street from it, but
And these people aren't saying they see you taking the bus stop. They say that Khalid calls you as well that night and says, hey, this thing just went bad, you gotta get me up out of here. And you pick him up and that's the last they see of him. They don't say they know he goes to Oakland that night. They say,
Khalid with a phone. He didn't even have a phone when he was out here. So unless he's using Tanisha's phone or Max's phone, he couldn't even make a call to anyone. But that didn't happen. I mean, I don't know how you just then I guess believe everything what they...
well, let's talk about Raheem Mohammed, another individual who certainly has no axe to grind towards you, does he?
Well, only if he has a case to get out of.
Oh, well, he does.
Well, he must have. Why would he say, I just told him...
Jaffar,
That don't even make sense.
to you.
I told him everything about somebody else's.
I hope you can appreciate how difficult it is for me, because your position is, everybody else on the planet's a liar, but I'm telling the truth.
Because Raheem hung with Josh out here. I didn't hang with him because he was doing dope out here. He hang with Josh. They do things together. You know, they've done robberies together before. So that's their thing. He was going with Tanisha, Raheem, for a while. So, I mean, if he hears little bits and pieces of shit, yeah, and he asks me questions, I can only tell him what I know from Tanisha. Or from what Josh, I think, what I accused Josh of doing, not to him, but what I thought Josh had did. I can never say what, Max called me that night. I never, because it never happened. Never would tell him Max called me that night.
Raheem's story in 2004 and again in 2008 are consistent, which is you call Raheem, tell him that this thing just went bad, you pick him up and you two drive by the crime scene.
I called Raheem?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So I just kept driving by the crime scene?
I was just gonna ask you that.
Two separate cars.
Two separate cars, yeah.
That he keeps driving, why? Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Well, yes, it
We
does.
talked about your history in Oakland and seeing murder scenes, but guess what, Raheem? You're not involved in any of those. You're involved in this one, and that's why you're driving by. You don't know that they're dead at that time. I don't think Max knows that they're dead at that time. Max knows that there's been a shooting.
It was on the news.
Not at the time this happens. Not at the time you guys are doing the drive-by. The news hasn't aired yet.
Doing the drive-by.
And checking the crime scene? No, that'd be stupid.
Picking up
Well,
different...
fortunately, we deal in the business of people doing things that are not perhaps the most well thought out, most carefully planned
He
things.
just doesn't strike me as being that guy.
It's
I
like
mean,
he just-
you're right, there are people...
But he's also not on the crime scene when this thing takes place. He's got two other people, if everyone else is to be believed. He's got two other people who are there to go do business for him. They're reporting this thing just went bad. They're not going to drive back by the crime scene, which explains why Max Reed's in the back, ducking down, pulling the jacket up, trying to hide himself. But they want to know, is this what's going on over there? I don't think that that's unreasonable, at least in my estimation whatsoever.
Well,
Not
once, twice, getting a little
Just
bit...
with everybody...
But it makes sense, too. They just drive different
Just-
vehicles. Crystal Murray says that you're driving the Suburban, and Raheem Mohammed says you're driving the sedan, which would make sense to go switch cars, because there would be nothing suspicious about the two different cars driving by the crime scene, and it's on the corner of a busy street. It's on Wells Avenue. It's not like it's a private, small street
And then
that traffic...
the other part of it too is, whether you believe it or not, Detective Soto and Mr. Houston and I watched the pre-test. It was very clear what the intent of that question was, and you said, yeah, I understand, I'm comfortable that this is the question. If you were laboring under the assumption that you drove Trish home, first of all, my experience with the polygraph is that you would have said, no, when you asked me that question, this is what I'm thinking, you mean I've driven down that street before, okay? I'm not comfortable with that.
Do you know why he didn't change the question like we asked him to?
It's supposed to say crime scene, he said area. I mean,
Yeah, you remember we told him the area was...
But in the pre-test, and
And I know
that's
what
the
your thoughts
reason,
are, but do you know why he didn't change it? I mean, why wouldn't he change it as we requested?
I don't know, Dave.
I mean, that's the problem.
But the problem is that during the pretest, if you're having those questions, that's the whole point of the pretest, is to make sure that you're on the same page with the operator, that you understand the purpose of the question. And the purpose of the question was this allegation that you drove by. And on that agreed upon issue, you come up deceptive. And let's just say for the sake of argument that it's an innocent thing that you drive Trish down Wells Avenue all the time. You would not run dirty or deceptive on that issue.
But his place wasn't on the corner of Wells.
It's 40 yards inside. I mean, it's...
There's a bar that's directly on the corner, and it's just inside Wells. That's not even 40 yards.
I didn't pick up everybody and drive by.
And we haven't even talked about Joshua, who really, quite frankly, went to great lengths to protect you and to not involve you in this thing. Right until you threw him under the bus last time we talked to you, if you want to talk about it. Joshua has a little different...
And then the other thing, and this is maybe kind of far afield, but if you're concerned with your name being out there, then you need to shut up to Fat Phil Benson and the other people that you're telling this story to. I mean, when you get on the phone and you start telling the police about Tynesha and Josh, and you're telling Phil Benson, well, then it's going to go everywhere, and that's not us.
It's not going everywhere.
Oh, really? Really?
It's not going everywhere because of Phil.
Oh, really?
Really.
And how do you know that?
I mean, Phil and Josh have seen each other since Josh went home, and they haven't said anything, either one of them, to each other about
And
it.
how do you know that?
Because they say it. I mean, what are they? Just keeping a secret from me? What?
Well, I've seen stranger things happen. But, I mean, I thought the whole thing was your concern that your name be put out there. Well, you're putting your name out there.
I don't know why I'm myself and saying
I mean, if you tell Phil Benson these things when he's drunk or loaded or both, God only knows. And quite frankly, your last conversation, well, the conversation I listened to last between you and Phil Benson, it was pretty apparent that he was in an altered level of consciousness. I'm not sure who or what he's going to do with that, and I don't know that necessarily you should feel that comfortable with that.
What story on Josh? Anybody ask Josh to go on the box about his version?
Well, Josh is under house arrest at the time, so he's got the ankle monitor bracelet. We have not asked him to take a polygraph. Josh's name has never surfaced other than from Jaffar here most recently, saying that he organized this thing. We have not asked him to take a polygraph on this thing so far. We don't have the completed phone call between Joshua and the victim as we do with Jaffar and the victim in this thing. It just, nothing seems to ring true with that. And quite frankly, I think we've always said, I know I've been very candid with you over the last 2 or 3 years, this ain't about you. I don't want this to be about you. I want your information, and that's why we're here sitting with Mr. Houston working with you. Quite frankly, the problem I have, Dave, is I don't believe Jaffar is being honest with us. If Joshua was the one I thought was ringleading, I would have gone to Joshua, well, we have gone to Joshua a long time ago and told him, hey, give us your information and we'd like to use you as a witness as opposed to charging you. What we think is the most appropriate are the 2 people who were out on the scene who committed this crime be held accountable. That's what we're trying to do here. The problem is in my estimation, again, for me to believe you, I have to disbelieve everybody else, and it's just too difficult. There's just too many bits and pieces of information that coordinate and all mesh together. For Joshua to factor in, as you've said, that would throw the entire balance off of what everybody else told me.
Plus, sending his sister and using his car to go do it.
Oh, he acknowledges that that's true. He acknowledges that that's true.
As a
Yeah.
result of my phone.
You call him and he's under house arrest so he can't do it, and you ask him as a favor.
Yeah.
I mean, why would I?
And ask him for a favor so he sends his sister with those guys down there. That's exactly what he says.
And that's what Tynesha says too.
So he's just, that's like, he's just innocent. He doesn't even know what's going on. He's just,
You know what? Let's be very candid here. When you say innocent, what does that mean to you?
that means he's just doing me a favor, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I don't think on one level anybody in this is innocent in the sense that innocent means ignorant of what's going on. Did you believe there was going to be a murder? I find that hard to believe. I do. I find that incredulous, yeah. Did Josh believe it was going to be a murder? Yeah. I find that hard to believe. Did you think that there was going to be a lick? Oh, I find that very conceivable. I think, did Josh consider that in light of the conversations that he claims were, that he was privy to with you and Max? Yeah. I don't think he's innocent in the same way I don't think you're innocent. Now, does that mean that you were conspiring to murder, or Josh was conspiring to murder? Heavens no.
And Joshua acknowledges the conversations about burglarizing and ultimately robbing Mo Nelson and being present for those. I mean, he says, yeah, I was there when these conversations occurred.
But you're saying those never occurred either?
Yeah, but wasn't somebody else, according to Chris, there were other people there when those conversations supposedly occurred?
Well, he says Max Reed is there as well as Max's girlfriend at the time, Lauren.
Torres.
Can you lay, and again, this, I don't think this will take too much time, can you lay out for Jaffar exactly what you think happened, and then give me a couple minutes to talk to Jaffar?
Yeah. Essentially, I think there were a series of conversations that were had involving Max Reed, involving you, involving Lauren Torres, involving Joshua Ford, in which the possibility of Mo being robbed or burglared, because according to Josh, just to be very candid in the interest of full disclosure, Josh said, I thought you guys were going down, that Max was going down the wrong trail, because I said, you guys know where his studio is, just rip him off or just get the dope funded. You don't have to do a lick. There's easier ways to do it. And he's trying, he says, to suggest alternatives to a lick, to a robbery, saying, this guy's easy. I mean, we don't have to do that much to get over on him. There are other ways. But he is insistent that you were a party to those conversations. And with him. So it's not like he's saying, oh, it's all Jaffar and not me. He's saying, oh yeah.
Up in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, he says you bet.
He'll put himself in the middle of it to say that, oh, but Jaffar was the leader.
No, he didn't say Jaffar's a leader. He says Jaffar's present during these conversations. Jaffar is a participant in the conversation. Max, the same things that I hear Max say, Jaffar's a party to that conversation.
And make no bones about that. Joshua, we've talked to Joshua over several weeks, and he did his damnedest to keep your name out of this and to protect you. I don't think that I'm going too far to tell you that he sat in that interview room and cried, tears, because of his devotion and his friendship with you.
Wow. You don't know what's going on inside him while he cried. I'm just saying...
Well, I can tell you that he didn't say anything until ultimately the last time I met with him, and I said, listen, you want to protect Jaffar? Listen what he says. He says, this is on you. And that's finally when he says, all right, I'm not protecting him no more. This is what I know. He would not tell us a single word about you, Jaffar, and to me that carries some weight. So I don't want it to be construed that Joshua came in here on the first conversation and threw him under the bus. He did, over probably 4 or 5 conversations, everything he could to protect you.
And it was all, I know more, but I'm close with this guy. I can't do that.
My sister watches his kids. He's my friend forever. So I want, out of fairness to Joshua, I want you to know that he was very protective of you. Very, very protective of you and your involvement in this thing up until the last conversation. And you can dismiss it all you want. To me, it carries a lot of weight about what he ultimately has to say.
It doesn't carry any weight that you just willing to believe him anything.
You're right.
If he changes the story, if he...
You're right.
Whichever one...
He didn't change his story. He said, he said, I know what happened, I can't tell you. Jaffar is a friend of mine, I'm just not going to go there. I'm not going to go there.
I know what happened, I can't tell you.
Yeah.
He was refusing to implicate you because he said they were too close. You were too close to him, so he wasn't willing to talk about you, is I think what they're...
Yes, and he said, oh, make no mistake about it, I know. I just can't bring myself to talk about Jaffar. I can't. And he even said, it is Jaffar. I just can't go there. I'm not going to... He watches my sister, my sister watches his kids. I have known him forever. We were friends. I just am not willing to do it.
Yeah, that was all planned out. Since 03, he didn't even think he was involved. I mean, you talked to him back then, you say he was on ankle monitor, that was the end of it. So just now, you think...
No, stop. You said that he didn't drive. And he says... And you're right, okay? Now that he said it was Tynesha, yes, it was Tynesha. Yes, he did call me. Yes, he did ask to see if I could hook them up with a ride. And yes, I did.
Had planned all that time. I wouldn't even give up Tynesha's name if I would have had that. If I would have known they had that planned, if he says anything, we'll say this.
Were you present when there was a conversation involving Max Reed discussing whether or not it was plausible to rob Mo.
Never. Never. I never would have robbed Mo. I had money, they didn't have money. They all got together, they hung together. I wasn't into robberies. They got robbery priors. I don't be doing robberies. I sell dope. I mean, none of them had $500, $400, $300 to their name. That's their thing. You know?
Josh doesn't say that you're the ringleader, and if you're caught up in that, is mistaken.
I wouldn't say I'm the fourth player because I'm not gonna split nothing with them. It's no reason to. How much could they possibly get? I mean, for me to be the fourth, fifth, or something, I mean, they gotta pay Tanisa and them, I guess. They gotta pay. I mean, come on.
Well, do they? Because Tanisa said she didn't get anything out of this.
Well, I'm just saying. I mean, they would have.
Oh, really?
They pay her, right?
No.
Why not? She's just going for nothing. Oh, you believe she don't know again why she went, and I'm the only one that knew
What does
everything.
Tanisha say that her role was? I mean,
I've driven them to get dope before. I thought we were going to do something nefarious in the sense that I assumed they were going to pick up dope.
Stakeout.
And she said, I was fixing to leave because they were gone too long, and I'm thinking, this ain't right. I've been sitting here for 45 minutes, close to an hour, and I'm thinking, where are these guys? I've come to this neighborhood before, and so I'm thinking they're going to do business, to buy some dope.
so her deal is first she knew there was a problem is when they ran her.
Yes, and she says, when they run back and get in the car going, go, 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 go. And then she says, oh, yeah. And then she alleges that Kali makes some statements, and that Max then gets on the phone in her presence right then, and calls you, refers to you by name, and she says, I can't hear everything Jaffar says. I don't know the context of what Jaffar says in response to what Max is saying, but there is absolutely no doubt in my mind he is talking to Jaffar. And I can see how that would happen. I mean, you know, if you're present when someone makes a cell phone, I could, if you were to talk on the cell phone to Mr. Houston, I might be able, sitting across or in the car next to you, to hear enough to say, oh, that's an individual I know. That's Mr. Houston on the other end. Can I hear everything he says? No.
Especially because she says Kali's also talking to her as Max is on the phone with you. So she's listening to Kali and she's overhearing portions of Max's conversation to you. Which, as I said, matches up exactly with what Crystal Murray says occurs when you guys are at the Motel 6.
And Trish.
And Trish.
So what the deal is initially, they're claiming Jaffar was present during this initial contact or discussion as far as...
And there's actually, in fairness, there's a series of conversations about I want to get over on him, how much you think he has, how much you think is it just dope, is it money, is it...
When Mo's first music studio was over here behind the hospital, it starts even back then that they're talking about burglarizing his first studio over off of, what the heck's the street, behind Model Dairy down there. And then it graduates to when his new studio opens up over off of Wells. So, I mean, it's over a period of time, at least, that they're talking about breaking in, stealing the equipment, robbing him, getting his dope. How much dope does he get fronted at a time? How much money does he have at a time? Is it better to hit him when he's cash rich and has no dope, or is it better to hit him when
Only
he's
Josh was his friend. You know, we are in business. Only Josh would know all that. You know, so...
And Joshua says that. And Joshua says that he tries to give you guys information to steer you towards, hey, if you want to get over on him, just call and order up the dope and don't pay him. If you want to get over on him, go to his studio and go steal his equipment and go sell his equipment. That's the route. He says, I'm trying to direct them.
He's trying to direct it, so he's the ringleader. But I mean, it's like he's really directing
No,
it.
he's just participating.
I know, but you don't believe. But for some reason, you just believe that he has been protecting me. And when he cries, he tells you the whole truth. I'm not involved in their planning of robberies. I thought that was supposed to be one of the questions or something. I'm not planning robberies for months in advance or weeks in advance. I'm not involved in their conversations planning robberies. That's crazy.
And they don't have any of those conversations in your presence?
No.
So what would be the motive then of them saying that?
I mean, all I'm thinking is if he says anything, this is the story. This is what we're going to say. I've been telling him, I stopped fucking with Josh even then. He knew it could come down to me and I guess he's lying.
Stop. By your own statements, you hadn't stopped messing with him. You called him that night.
I told you, I've been after moving and stopping.
Let's, if we can, stay a little slower pace so we don't get caught up in the emotion of it.
Well, that's what.
But didn't you
Well,
call?
she's not saying that. She stopped dealing with him too.
Can I
She
talk
felt
for a
like
second?
threw her under the
Can I
bus.
talk
and
for a
just-
second? Isn't it your claim that you called Josh that night to get Tynesha to give them a ride?
I don't know.
Okay, so how did Tynesha end up giving them a ride?
Because she was living with her brother Josh. If they called Josh.
And you're saying Tynesha called you afterward and told you, that's the only way
Afterwards, she
you...
called me afterwards, and then when we talked again and she hung up, I knew she was back around her brother or whoever. She couldn't talk. She just was talking vague, and I was like, okay, well, call me when you can talk. And she just hung up. I wasn't talking to them about it. I was talking to Teresa about it.
Well, how did you know that she had driven them then, if she's being
She
vague?
told me. She told me at first when they first got in the car and I could hear music. She told me. And then when she hung up and I called back.
Before it happened?
No, this is when they were in the car. This is when they were driving away. And after. When I called back, because she just hung up abruptly like that, I waited a couple minutes and called back. And she was with her brother and then she said, yeah, they're talking right now. And I was like, who talking? What's up? And she was like, yeah, I can't really, they're right now. And shit like that. I was like, okay, well, call me when you can talk. And I just hung up. I mean, that's crazy. I never sat there and planned that. They all
You asked for the series of events. That's the precursor to it. What we believe happened that night is that these two men, they go out there. We believe they hide in the shadows across the street from the studio. It's a cold November night. They hide. We have witnesses who see these two people hiding in the shadows. We understand that Jaffar may get a phone call saying, hey, where is this guy? That maybe Jaffar's role is to get
And
him
we
to
do
the
have your
studio.
telephone call to him at that time.
Get him to the studio. These guys are out there freezing, waiting for an extended period of time. An independent witness, a resident in the apartment where they're hiding, says that they're there for approximately 45 minutes, perhaps longer. They're waiting, getting cold, calling, saying, hey, where is this guy? He's not showing up. Finally, the victim does in fact show up with another subject. When these guys, they go inside, they get some perceivably dope out of the studio, come back out. They're confronted by the two guys that we believe are hiding in the shadows. The victim does not comply with the demands and the orders to give up his stuff. There's some kind of a physical struggle, a shot's fired. The wallet of the victim and some other items are taken. The suspects run down the street. The wallet's found a portion of the way down the street. We understand that Jaffar gets a telephone call from Max, obviously saying, hey, this thing just went bad. We understood that before that Max had made, or that Jaffar had made some comments about that they were supposed to come into the dope as I talked about, and that Jaffar ends up getting into his car, meeting and picking up Max Reed shortly thereafter, drive by the scene. At some point, he drops him off. At some point, through other witnesses, we understand that Jaffar picks up Khalid, and Khalid disappears from Reno after that point. Nobody that we've talked to has seen Khalid after that night. Max is seen for a couple of weeks, and then he disappears as well. So that is kind of the, and then we have the completed phone call from the victim's cell phone to Jaffar's phone right before he dies.
Max is seen for a couple of weeks and disappeared. We're not even sure. He went to jail. He had a domestic. He beat up his girl, whatever, Lauren. He went to jail. He still stayed out there. He had his apartment. He didn't disappear. You know, and Khalid was out here like a couple of weeks after that. He was living with Josh, sleeping on his floor. He didn't disappear either.
I want to talk to you about the phone calls. And obviously, I know that phone records may or may not be available, but you've got G to Mo at a time frame that's consistent.
Yes,
And that time frame is consistent with when these two are supposedly hiding in the shadows?
correct.
Is there any corroboration of that call concerning any of their phones?
Well, we didn't have them identified. Historically, we didn't make those requests for their phones because we didn't know who they were.
And understand, out of fairness, we inherited this case when we got the DNA hit from the shadows. That is when we became involved. We had limited to no involvement in 03 when this case first initially took place. I didn't get involved. I went up and talked to the damn miners.
I wish we would have had with the benefit of hindsight, the ability to look at a number of other
You gave them a
cell
long time to
phones.
get their stories together, especially
We've
with
given
Josh.
you a long time to get your stories together too, don't you?
Every thing that you say about other people could arguably be said about you.
You didn't say anything to us then.
But because you thought I was involved always, and I've been saying I wasn't involved, that's why I
Well,
wasn't talking.
I knew very little about the case when I saw you in 04. My interaction has been with, it begun in 07 when I called you.
Hey guys, what about the Mo to G? You said you have the completed phone call. What's the timing of that, if you have in reference to the shoot?
Yeah, let me go pull it so that I don't have to guess.
Anything on the other phones as far as Tanisha and her claims?
Well, the billing records from '03 are no longer available.
I understand. I didn't know whether somebody had put them together.
Well,
Again, no.
Tanisha had never surfaced until our last conversation with you.
Right.
And although I appreciate your disclosure about Tanisha, Tanisha too
Of course.
gives a version.
His sister. I would have
No,
never.
not about Josh.
No.
Tanisha corroborates the claims of Trish Martinez and Crystal Murray, that there was a phone conversation. But I mean, that's the individual that said she could shed the light on you, or on what really happened. And she and Josh, independent of each other, say, oh, no.
It's not really independent when it's a sister and it's been together since forever. I mean, it's not really independent.
And of course, we suspect with the trip that when he tells us he gives Kali a ride to the bus depot, we believe there's also communications that take place there between Jaffar and Kali that I think it's 9:12 p.m.
Is that the G to Mo or Mo to G?
Mo to G.
Okay. What time was the shoot, any idea?
The shooting looks like it is, we get the call, if I'm reading this correctly, at 10:21.
How about the G to Mo? Any idea on that one?
We have several incoming calls. The records that we have are Mo's records, and at that time, they don't list the incoming number. They list as an incoming call. And I can give you those times, but out of fairness...
Any fairness on, has anybody been able to pull Jaffar's?
No, we've attempted to pull Jaffar's.
Okay. Can I have about 5 minutes?
You could, I was just going to try to confirm that time on the call coming in. I believe it looks like it's 10:21 that call is received by us, but I was going to try to double check.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as the report of the incident?
10:21.
10:21.
So that's it, you got the call at 10:21, so I mean, we're gonna see maybe a 5-minute variance there.
No, it's contemporaneous with, the surviving witness who's there with Mo actually calls as they're running away.
So they left the witness standing.
Well, they drug him into the studio. The one suspect, he's compliant. They drag him into the studio while the other suspect is struggling with Mo. They drag him at gunpoint into the studio, put him down, and then he goes out to help the other suspect
Control him.
Mo.
Yeah.
And the witness says that he kind of tries to peek as much as he can out the glass door and sees limited of what he sees. Here's the gunshot, and then sees them running eastbound.
And he calls immediately, so we believe that that phone call to 911 was actually made within seconds of the shooting.
Anything, so we don't have any records referencing what occurs in the vehicle next as far as calls between whoever's in the vehicle to Jaffar?
Well, we have
back.
Trish Martinez and Crystal Murray, and
No,
now
but
Tanisha.
no phone
No,
calls.
right.
Okay. All right, thanks, guys.
Give us a second to go turn off the recording before you guys talk, okay? Unless you want us to...
All right,
Just give me the thumbs up and I'll let him know.